Welcome to the Design Mind Frogcast. Each episode, we go behind the scenes to meet the people designing what's next in the world of products, services, and experiences, both here at Frog and far, far outside the pond. I'm Elizabeth Wood. Today on our show, we're talking about connected products and services that perfect customer experience while driving new business value. More specifically, we're starting with a focus on serving some very special members of our families, our pets. Recently, our team worked with Nestlé Purina to create an intelligent litter box system that collects and shares data about your cat's health and wellness. Of course, this use case is just one prime example of using data and technology to improve everyday experiences and better our lives in the process. Joining us for this discussion and more today are Chiara Diana, Chief Design Officer at Frog, Kristin Slater, Senior Manager IoT Products Petivity at Nestlé Purina, and Jeff Hebert, Global Head of Intelligent Products and Services and Intelligent Industry for Capgemini Invent and President of Synapse Product Development. This conversation is also available on video, so you can check today's show notes for a link to watch along. These three had a lot to share about what's required when launching meaningful connected products and services. So let's jump in.
I just concluded a conversation on connected products and data and how insights are enabling business transformation. All of that in a context completely new to me, pet care and pet parents. I'm Chiara Diana, Chief Design Officer, Frog. So, Kristin, Jeff, thanks a lot for joining me in this conversation today. What we want to cover is connected products, value creation, and for sure, pet care. Building on, I think, a recent collaboration that you had around the project. But before we relieve more about that, maybe it will be useful for the audience to get a little bit more context about yourself and your role.
Sure. So my name's Kristin Slater. I'm the Senior Product Manager on Petivity. And Petivity is a smart litter box monitor. That's our first device to market. It is 4 load cells that sit under your litter box, collects data and translates that into meaningful insights to help users proactively care for their cat. It's our first device of a collection of connected devices that we'll be launching to market in the coming years and represents a completely new business model for Nestlé Purina, where, of course, we've traditionally been focused on manufacturing of dog and cat food.
Wow, what a change. We'll hear more in the conversation today. Jeff, about yourself and Synapse.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Hebert. I'm the president of Synapse Product Development. Synapse has been around for over 20 years, helping clients who are ambitious to create new products and concepts. So we work with clients from the early stages of having an idea, having a concept of what they might bring to their customers, and really working through every different phase of development, from architecture and feasibility, building proof of concepts, helping them actually figure out what the supply chain would be, and really making those products real. And we do that for large established brands like Nestlé and Purina, as well as disruptors and new startups and entrants into markets. So yeah, that's a little bit of the background of Synapse. And you asked about mission. I think for us, we really think about having a positive impact through the work that we do. And that really spans both things that have a benefit for people, and in this case, pets as well. So think about health, wellness, social impact, and then also things that have a benefit for the planet. How do we make things more sustainable? How do we reduce energy consumption? How do we actually start addressing climate change more broadly? So those are some areas that we have some serious passion around, and we work across markets.
Amazing. Also for you, Jeff, a question about that helps us set the context. So I said that we're going to talk about connected product, but what does it mean? So with your expertise, help us define it so that we have a common definition as we move forward.
Yeah, so I think there's a few different ways I would think about this space, and maybe it helps to frame a few different layers or sort of a spectrum. So at one end of the spectrum are just products, and we all use many products in our day-to-day that are not smart and not connected, and they bring a lot of utility. So that's not part of this conversation, but those are products that exist. Then we start adding in kind of embedded systems and products that are able to perform some kind of processing on their own. I think about this like your alarm clock. You know, it has a system in it, it provides you some utility, but it might not be connected. It probably didn't just change the time zone or change the time with daylight savings. So the next step beyond that would be connected products that actually have that two-way communication into the cloud, either directly via cellular or indirectly through your phone or some other mechanism. And then really connected products to me were now edging into this next step beyond that, which I would call intelligent product ecosystem. So it's not just about the product. It's not just about the connectivity. Now it's about the insight. It's about the utility that you can bring to a user, and you have interfaces on the device. You have them in the cloud via the web. You've got mobile applications, lots of different ways to provide that utility for people.
Yeah, and I think that these layers of intelligence is what has been core at the project that you two have been working together. To start, maybe Kristin, you can provide us a little bit more background about Petivity. So we saw you just launched to market. It's your first connected product. How this is kind of fitting into the Purina strategy?
Purina heritage CPG company. We saw the vision from early on, and not just me and a handful of other colleagues, and knowing that if we could track just a few things about a pet on a day-to-day basis, and cats especially, but dogs as well, are biologically conditioned to hide symptoms. So if we could track just a handful of things, how much easier pet care could be. But to drive that back to the business was the challenge, and to frame it in a way of what does that mean for a pet food manufacturer? Our expertise is in putting together ingredients and manufacturing at huge scales. Why do we need to track when a cat goes to the bathroom? So we had to craft this narrative about why that matters, and then think really creatively about how we do tie it in to our core business. This has been a journey. It's taken on several iterations. The most recent one was Synapse, and the most fruitful one that is bringing us to commercialization. But the business case has really been in taking that data and translating it into insights. We have a ton of functional products that can help achieve health results for those pets based on those insights and driving back loyalty to our business. So that was the narrative that captured traction with our stakeholders internally that now is able to justify the existence of our business.
This is super interesting because it's representing in a way how this layer of intelligence is helping you to deliver in a novel way against the value proposition that you have, and it's the historical value proposition, but can be reinterpreted in a very different way.
And we say it all the time, so it starts to become rote, but we really mean it is like pets and people are better together. But there's a lot in that relationship, and we can have a material difference on that and taking away some of that anxiety and that unknown by starting to deliver the data that we're capturing with our devices.
Yeah, and so I know that you and Synapse, so you and Jeff, have been collaborating on this project. So would you like to share a little bit more about this collaboration?
Sure.
Yeah, I could start. Yeah, just to piggyback on what you were just saying, to me, part of what's so interesting and exciting about this project is taking all of this core insight from Purina that historically has been used to generate your core consumable products, and now create this window into that insight for the consumer directly. And that's the really cool insight and opportunity that we get from this program. Yeah, we've been working together for a number of years now, from some early development and early concepting work, and then really through the multiple iterations of both hardware and software and algorithm development, together with the broader company that we are part of, which is Capgemini Invent, which includes Cambridge consultants as well, which has been a big part of this program. So us together really collaborating over the last couple of years on significant iteration to create this product and get it out into the market.
This project that you have been working together, which now is in the market, seems to me a part of a sort of movement or a paradigm shift in the industry. Would you like to share with us some of the elements of this transformation in the pet care industry?
Sure. So one thing that's been static in pet care is the understanding that the primary consumer need is that reassurance, that we make decisions day to day for our pets that almost become mindless at some point, but we love these pets in our lives. We want to make sure we're doing right by them. That need has been static. How we solve for that need is where the technology has started to enable new ways to interact with our consumers. The other thing we've seen is a shift in the consumer mentality in how they relate to their pets. So starting to think about their pets' mental and emotional wellness is a relatively new trend that's evolved over the last 7 or 8 years that we've really tried to pay close attention to. And that is in somewhat a contrast to another trend of users wanting, or pet parents really, wanting to balance their pets' needs with their own needs. So there's a nice healthy tension between those two. So watching those trends evolve with that static trend and starting to understand how can we start solving for those needs in new ways. And we see things like a lot of in-home diagnostics cropping up, which are really inspirational. at Purina, we have the Pet Care Innovation Prize. In the last few years, the winners of those prizes have been really, their value proposition is about enabling care at home. And it's not trying to get the vet out of the equation. It's trying to give control to that user. It's knowing when to pay attention and what to do about it, or when to have the reassurance that everything's okay.
I think this is interesting because there are a lot of parallelism that you could drive towards, in general, the transformation of the healthcare system. I've been working a lot into the life science space. And I think that there is one additional element probably to what you said, is that these technologies and these data and this digital platform are enabling new forms of relationship across the different actors of this ecosystem. I think this comes on one side, and I'm curious to hear your perspective about how do you put these different actors in contact? But on the other side, how this is requiring a much broader interaction with the network that is outside of your own company.
Yeah. For Petivity, for the cat side specifically, we know that less than 30% of cats see a vet on an annual basis. And a lot of that is because it's a pain point. It's an acute stress event for a cat to go to the vet. It's an acute stress event for a human to take a cat to the vet. It's not something anyone looks forward to. So you need a really good reason to go. It's starting to tie together knowing when. So about tying that care element and that network of doctors, we really see Petivity as an intermediary between cat parents and the vets, of getting them to have a closer relationship through technology. And whether it's a push or a pull from the vet, a push from us to say it's time to pay attention, I think that's really the direction we're headed, especially on the Smart Litter Box Monitor product.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting because you start to see that there is a product, a device that starts to be connected and connecting and sharing the data, building the insights, and then creating the service on top of that. So really moving towards the intelligent ecosystem, Jeff, that you were mentioning before. And this is something that is happening in several industries, we know, right? Much broader than the pet care space itself. But I want to understand with you, what do you think that is specific and it's unique about this physical to digital to service interface in your specific market?
The Smart Litter Box Monitor sits under your existing litter box. And we've heard from consumers, which is really validating from the start, that once it's set up, it virtually disappears because it just becomes a part of the environment. You hardly see it unless you're cleaning your litter box. So we're passively collecting data every time the cat goes to the restroom. And one user has compared it to a carbon monoxide detector. If I'm not paying attention, I don't even know it's there. The great thing is it tells me when to pay attention, which is great. And it was also a debate we were having with our marketing team when we started to consider how we would go to market, is they wanted to feature the device, which makes sense. It's the hardware. But we're like, it's not the hardware. This is really about the data. And we really need to focus on the insight that the data delivers. And it is a tiered process. To do that and to get there is really hard. And I'm sure Jeff can speak to that as well as anybody. It's one thing for me to just say it. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into everything that we now are seeing come to life in this product.
Yeah, absolutely. And you asked about that physical digital interface.
Yeah.
To me, I could talk about this for so long, but this is like the core of our business, which is, there's a huge digital world out there and people saying things like software eating the world. But at the end of the day, we're human, we're physical, we're analog, we live in this physical world. And the planet is also, the environment around us is also physical and analog. And so to me, what's so cool about this space, about these connected products, is this ability to interact with that physical world. And one layer of that is this kind of sensing, what we're doing with this product, where we gather information that you just can't get through some other mechanism. And there's all kinds of interesting questions in that, like for this product, how do you sense it? What's the best way to get that information? And how do you do it in a way that considers the user privacy? Let's not put a camera in people's bathrooms. So I think there's really interesting challenges and opportunities to gather information from that physical world. And then there's these other aspects around how it becomes interactive, where you have the physical and digital, and you can actually get that two-way, not just sensing information, but getting information to go the other direction. And maybe the next step beyond that starts to become, how do you take action in the physical world? Can you automate things? Can you actually change the environment in some way? Which I can imagine my brain goes into various places about where your future could be with that. But yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about this physical digital interface.
It will be interesting to understand when you started What has been inspiring you to start the project? What was the original goal that you wanted to achieve, as well as what was the initial business case to convince the organization and say, this is a bit visionary, trust us, there is value at the end of that?
Yeah. So a handful of things. One of my colleagues who really was kind of the trailblazer in this space, he had a background in our litter division, which is Tidy Cats is our most well-known brand in our litter division. So he was working on this brand, and he's the one who said, if we stuck an accelerometer on a litter box, man, we could know some really great things.
There is an element about the data collection, but there is another element on the other side, which is your research and knowledge.
Sure.
So I think that what is interesting here is that you're putting together the insights that you collect from the data are enabling you to tap into the knowledge that you have in a novel way and bring that in a meaningful way to the pet and to the pet parents. It's really fascinating to see how a novel way to sense, interpret behaviors is enabling you to give maximum value to something that is a core asset of your organization.
Yeah. So some of our early feedback was this idea of, so what? So what if my cat goes to the bathroom or weighs so much? But that translation, and that's where I work with a woman named Dr. Reagan McGowan, and she's our lead kind of cat expert on the program. And we talk about it frequently as my job is to get Dr. Reagan to be in the palm of every pet parent's hand. So I act as that conduit. And what would Dr. Reagan say about this? If Dr. Reagan was your next door neighbor and you had a question about why your cat's doing this weird thing, what would she tell you? And so that as the role of product is really to extract that and translate it, deliver it to our pet.
And I think, this point is really important, which is you can collect a ton of data and you can make really sophisticated AI algorithms. But unless you have a way first to tag that data and understand what it actually meant and associate it in a way that you have good data in the first place, and then on top of that, you have this sort of insight, you have the people that really know this space telling you how to interpret it or what the thresholds are, or what the events are, how frequent it matters. Those are the types of things that actually really add value on top. So your fancy AI algorithm doesn't have that, right? And it may not get it from the training data directly. So how you combine those two things, I think, is a really important part of where you get the value from a product like this. In a way, when you're building a physical product like this, you want it to be as simple as possible. You want it to be as robust, as cheap, as reliable as possible, and that means simplicity wherever you possibly can. And so how do you iterate on the sensing modalities and the data that you're going to need at the same time that you're iterating on the actual algorithms to get to the sort of minimum viable set of a product?
Yeah, in fact, Jeff, we are tapping into what was my next question to both of you. You mentioned data, artificial intelligence. We mentioned the science side. We spoke about the service. We spoke about the user experience. Lots of different things that needs to come together in order to deliver this product in a very, let's say, simple way for the user at the end. I would like to hear from you both. What were these different layers that went into the project?
There's a lot of coordination, a lot of orchestration in terms of what gets tweaked at what time, and the idea of what's the common saying that Jim Collins has all the time is the last responsible moment to make a decision became really poignant in my life as knowing that all these streams of work were moving at the same time, and we needed to understand the dependencies, but also make the decisions in the correct kind of pattern to make sure we were moving as efficiently as possible. And so that was coordination that Synapse was really our shepherd to guide us there. But to understand how cloud and AI and then user experience all converge in the palm of a user's hands in the mobile app. And all those things have to work so closely together. And everyone has to have a really clear vision on what we're delivering. And I think we were lucky on the Smart Litter Box Monitor is we had very clear vision from the beginning. So we were so lucky to have that because I've worked on programs where there's like a nebulous idea of what that value proposition is. We knew exactly what our value proposition was.
One of the kind of key sort of success criteria is this highly collaborative, highly iterative approach. Mm-hmm. Yes, we have a clear understanding of what we're trying to achieve at the highest level, but underneath that, being willing to explore and iterate and find different ways to actually get there. What's the right sensing? What's the right data? What's the right algorithm? Does it need to be AI, or could you just do a really basic threshold and say, oh, the cat went, done? So how do you tie those things together and collaborate iteratively, as opposed to where we see it fail more often is the sort of waterfall or more siloed approach where it's, okay, we came up with the business idea, then we came up with an experience that enabled it, and then we pass it to engineering to go create, and then we go scale it. And when you try from that perspective, you run into these lost in translation moments, or you get stuck with an architecture that just doesn't make sense.
What we're delivering now is so far beyond what we thought we could achieve when we got greenlit to commercialize this in early 2020. I think that's another testament that I'll just throw in just to give Jeff and his team a virtual high five. We launched this project in January 2020. And I had all of these grand plans for in-home user experience testing and learning side by side with cat owners. And we had to do that all virtually because of the pandemic. And so we learned how to work together in new ways. We were learning side by side. So it's a testament to you and your team and the flexibility that we brought to the table collectively. But we achieved our timelines, which is nothing short of a miracle.
And I think it's interesting for me to learn from you too. What has been specifically, in this case, but Jeff, even more broadly for your experience, the challenge of connected product at scale? Because we are not talking about a connected jewelry, which has a limited production that you can almost craft one by one. Here we're talking about mass production of an intelligent solution. Kristin, how was that embedded in the way in which you have been approaching the project?
For me, it's about those value propositions for the user. Like I said, we had clear vision from the beginning of what that core value proposition was. But I think the lingering question was, is that enough to sustain a business? Mm-hmm. And in our pilot phase, it became really obvious that pet parents who had a sick cat immediately understood the value of this product. It immediately alleviated and solved problems for them out of the gate with zero explanation needed. The challenge for us then as the product team was to understand how to attract that healthy cat market, or for healthy cat owners, how to keep them engaged in the system. And that's where we toggled slightly, not away from our core value proposition, but to understand that we need to find engagement hooks to keep them in the system for us to have the chance to deliver that meaningful health insight. Because if you have a healthy cat, you could theoretically use this product for years before we provide a really meaningful clutch insight.
Which, just building on it, I think speaks to another aspect, which is how in this long development process, you have been able to keep the value proposition and the ultimate, let's say, attention to the users at the core of the process. Sometimes you derail, right? Because it's so long and so many different actors interplaying.
Yeah.
How you did it.
It wasn't without challenge. It's one of the key things we do, and that I'm so proud of that we were able to achieve, was identify multiple cats in a household without requiring a collar or leveraging RFID on the microchip. It was a massive challenge for the AI team to figure out how to do this just on the cat's weight and behavior alone in the litter box. But we did it. And now it's one of our claims to fame. It's the number one question we get from our customer service team is people are always asking, how are you doing this? And once, like, we just on the plane ride down this morning, I got a note from our customer service team, and it was a testimonial on our website now saying it's working for my 5-cat household incredibly well. I think we have a claim on our website that says we can only guarantee performance of 3 cats or more. We've got multiple 13-cat households on the system where the AI model is performing. So we solved it. They did it. It was great. But to get more specifically back to your question, understanding the value proposition at a high level and then all the things that kind of ladder up to it. And that broad versus deep conversation was certainly a part of it. But that's existed in a couple of different forms, and also in that healthy cat conversation. It all comes up to delivering insight for cat owners in a meaningful way. The product team has been really conscientious of protecting that and making sure we don't get distracted by technological challenges, because they're bound to come up, or business challenges of starting to focus on sales instead of the user experience. And we've kept our elbows high.
This is such an important point. And again, back to this sort of, we get to see a bunch of clients in this space. And I think maintaining that really serious laser focus on the value proposition for the customer, that's the key. Because so many companies are looking at this space and saying, I want to make my thing smart. I want to use this latest technology. I want to use AI. That's not the point. The point is, what's the value that you're creating for the customer, and all the other stuff is just in service of it. So I think you've done a really fantastic job of keeping that focus.
Thank you.
And it's about keeping the focus on the value proposition, but remaining flexible on the way in which you could achieve it in order to be able to flex if there is an impediment or if there is a new opportunity that is actually emerging.
Hi, it's Elizabeth here, interjecting to let you know that if you're interested in what it takes to create products and services that connect people, planet, and progress, you can visit the Frog website to learn more about the connected world. Bringing to life memorable connected moments is about way more than hooking up just any old device to the internet. It's about enabling exceptional experiences, new business paradigms, and elevated operations, while delivering both greater sustainability and breakthrough growth. Learn more about how to bring an opportunity into focus, design to be iconic, engineer innovation, and chart the path to impact. Check today's show notes for a link to explore the connected world with Frog, part of Capgemini and Bent. Okay, back to the conversation with our experts.
I think you and I, Jeff, spoke a little bit about this topic of the algorithm. I was so fascinated when he told me that you could recognize different cats. So, amazing. Tell me more about it.
Sure, yeah. I'll give you a little bit of context, but I think this is a great example of where AI makes sense. Like I said, a lot of clients or a lot of people are thinking about this space and going, oh, I want to implement AI. AI is a means to an end. And so if we, for this product, could have done something as simple as, oh, we know you have 3 different cats and they all weigh different amounts. And so when they use the box, we know they're 3 different cats. If we could do that, we would have. But in this case, we couldn't. And so back to the discussion around data, it really starts with really well collected and well tagged data to be able to feed an AI algorithm development. And so in this case, we had hours and hours of video synced with sensor data from the actual prototype product to be able to create this database of the events that are being tagged and are understood as to what they mean associated with the actual data coming off of the device. And then with that database, now we can go into kind of the academic AI space and start developing deep learning models that start to figure out these associations and the exact pattern that the cat might implement as it's using the box. So that's the kind of key mechanism. But I think above that then becomes, it's no longer AI, it's back to the insights that we were talking about before and the science and the vets that Purina has access to. We're able to take the kind of events and say, what does this mean? What's the point? What does the consumer do with this information? So I think it's multiple layers of different types of algorithms and approaches here that are used to generate that final insight for the customer.
Now you mentioned that you have been POC, pilot, and now it's in the market finally. So you mentioned few positive feedback that you're collecting from the users of the product. Would you like to maybe share a little bit more about what you're hearing?
It's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
So our first testimonial is still my favorite. It came from one of our in-home users in our first cohort. And so our mobile app was a skeleton. We didn't have an alert system at the time. We were really just providing that data with very little insight. And this woman reached out to me. She said, hey, I've got to let you know, over the weekend, Pip, her cat, was going back and forth to the litter box, which was in their basement. And she was like, under ordinary circumstances and without Petivity, I would have just ignored it as Pip doing weird things, weird cat things. She had gone into her mobile app and saw that Pip had visited his litter box 66 times. And that was more than enough to convince her to go to the vet. They went to the vet, got a diagnosis for lower urinary tract disorder that day, which, if you have a male cat, can be really catastrophic event. So she was falling over herself, grateful that a behavior that she would have dismissed as just a cat being a weird cat was actually something pretty significant that she needed to pay attention to. And so the best thing about this anecdote is when we went back and looked at the data, we realized that had our alert system actually been in place, we would have notified this pet parent over a month in advance that Pip had been exhibiting this odd behavior of going to the litter box increasingly more frequently. And a lot of times, especially with certain cat diseases, the benefit of time is so critical because you get that diagnosis and you can start treatment soon. And for things like kidney disease, you don't reverse that. You just treat it in the state where you capture it. And so giving someone a month jump on that diagnosis is really important. So that's one of my favorite testimonials so far. And there's plenty of others, but it was at the time when we received that testimonial, it was the boost we needed to know that we were doing the right thing and we should persevere and pushing through, because this is going to matter, and it was tangible evidence of that.
I think it's interesting that you keep emphasizing the value of data to the pets and to the pet parents. But as we bring connected product to market, the fact that we collect data becomes an interesting platform even for you, for Purina, to start thinking about how we can evolve the product based on the way in which we see this is used. The fact that this product is not more a consumable, but is connected and is bringing to you insights, transforming the way in which you manage the portfolio, you manage the backlog of innovation.
That's a great question. I think one of the things that now Petivity is providing back to us as a business is this feedback loop. Detect something as simple as a cat gaining weight, making a recommendation for a weight management product, but then can see in the data a change that, of course, we would assume to happen, but we can see it in a very real state because of the data. Through Petivity, we're able to detect anxiety behaviors that are correlated in and around the litter box. And we've got supplements that can help reduce that anxiety. So for me, it's just that benefit of the feedback loop back to the business to see how else can we start connecting these things. So if we're able to detect anxiety in and around the litter box, not only providing a supplement to help reduce that anxiety, but also an improved litter to maybe the cat's avoiding the litter box because of the paw feel. It's not a made up thing. That's a real thing. The first time I heard it, I was like, come on, paw feel, but it's a real thing. So, but also then helping users understand how their behaviors impact their cat's life in and around the litter box. Their decisions on scooping behaviors and hygiene all have an impact on that. So that kind of helps us connect our products more holistically.
And with respect to that, you spoke about connecting Petivity to other consumables that you have in your portfolio. How is Petivity interplaying with this broader digital ecosystem?
Sure. We're at early days for this, but we've got Pet Finder, which is the largest pet adoption platform, which is one of our key digital products. We just launched the My Purina app. So starting to connect the whole journey of pet ownership through this digital space, assuming a lot of people come in through the Pet Finder space. They make that adoption. There's a lot of questions when you acquire a pet, and Petivity can help answer those questions as you get to know and understand your pet. And even in the instance, it's not live yet, but as we brainstorm about where can our digital products start to intersect with one another, cats have a tendency to wander away. So if we can link that back to Pet Finder, those are the conversations we're starting to have in our office of where do those intersections make sense? All the recommendations we're able to make back, they're very personalized recommendations because they're based on specific pet data.
It's so interesting because I feel like a lot of companies want to sort of build the walled garden that they want their consumers to live inside of and only buy your consumables, et cetera. And I feel like the approach you're taking, because it's so customer centric and value focused, it's more like we're going to provide you so much utility that you want to be in this environment. And the more stuff that you can build around it and the more feedback loops you can create, the more that reinforces itself. And that's really powerful for your business and hopefully valuable for your customers too. So that it really is a win-win.
You spoke about, or your specific case with Petivity is a case in which you have been creating this connected and intelligent ecosystem starting from a consumable. And that's one of the ways in which those intelligent ecosystems are created, not the only one, but quite a frequent one. Do you think that can be taken as a reference from other industries and other sectors as a model?
It's a great question. And I suspect it really boils down to the value and what is the backing expertise of whatever that consumable is. I think starting there will lend itself to, well, then how does a connected proposition manifest? We could have started a lot of other places. We started with the Smart Litter Box Monitor for a variety of reasons, but knowing that the insight we can deliver to a cat owner is so much more meaningful than dogs are pretty vocal. They'll tell you what they need by and large, where cats are elusive, they're independent, and we happen to know so much about their nuanced, subtle behaviors. So that was one of the key points of the opportunity. And I don't even know if this is still in market or not, but Campbell's was doing something really cool a couple years ago where they had funded a metabolic test because they're a nutrition and wellness brand as well. And it was a metabolic wellness test that you would take, and then they would customize your diet. And I think that's a great example of taking your back-end expertise and reformulating your business plan based on whatever that expertise is. It may not be, all of your expertise. I'm sure they have a similar manufacturing expertise, but this was really highlighting what they could do in the nutrition space. And I found a ton of inspiration. I think it's dissecting your back-end knowledge to understanding how can you deliver value in unique ways. I think there's a lot of potential to scale that in a meaningful way. And I obviously believe it on the Petivity side.
Yeah. I think this is really extensible to a lot of other markets. Direct for consumable companies, for sure, whether that's other health and wellness companies that are, have supplements or have food or have other things that for humans as well. You can extend it to pharma. And I think there's a bunch of significant interest in that space about drug adherence and are people actually using this and how is it benefiting them? And can we get the feedback loop going that's similar to this? You can apply it in almost every industry. We start thinking about industrial IoT where we do sensing and then enable predictive maintenance.
I think all of different spaces will be huge transformation, each one with its own challenges, for sure. Kristin, how was it for you? Because you mentioned a couple of times, nodding to Jeff, of the complexity of landing this solution. It seems there is an element of transformation, which is really the transformation of the offering. So you move from something that is like either a single product or it's really a consumable, and you build this entire service dimension around it. But there is another element of transformation, which is really on the organizational side. Mm-hmm. And it's a transformation, let's say, at the R&D and development level, mm-hmm. but it's also a transformation of the operation of the company. When you have a service, in the moment in which you sell it is when you really need to start working, not before. I'm very curious to understand now this other side of the challenge from an organizational standpoint.
I often apologize at the start of meetings because they see me coming. I march down the hallway with my Petivity business in tow, and they know I'm going to ask for something extraordinary for the business to do, whether it is our distribution centers tracking product differently or our customer service agents learning about technology that they've never even considered before. I've already mentioned our marketing team, and then we've got our digital side, which is relatively brand new. Like I mentioned, we have mobile apps, but it's a far cry from building a mobile app to building a connected device that is delivering these types of insights. So we've built up our cloud team, and now is multiples of what we ever thought we'd have in terms of headcount, but also capability. So across the board, we've looked at what's most meaningful to Petivity, and let's focus on that. And that is cloud, marketing, data science. We've got that expertise in our PTC, which is our R&D center, where they work really closely with our data scientists. And there's kind of the trifecta of product and data science and pet experts. And we're kind of the core of that. And then we're supplemented by, we've internalized our mobile app team. And as I mentioned, our cloud team. So it's been soup to nuts, as my Midwestern heart would say. Across the board, we've had to change everything.
Yeah, I think you've hit a bunch of those different areas that I see a lot of clients struggle with as they start to transform into the space. Everything from marketing to just the technical capabilities, to the data, to the cloud side of things, to supply chain even, forward and reverse logistics. People don't tend to send back their food, but products that have issues in the field. So all of those different areas and kind of expanding. I think your point you made was really good, which is kind of focus on your core business in terms of what you hire up, grow internally. And then partner where you see it as something that, I might not need this every month of every year, or I want it as a specific team that I engage when I need it. So I think those are great points. And then I think another big one that we see, and I think you went through this as well, is that coming from your legacy business, it's what got all of the leadership to where they are. It's ingrained in the DNA of how they make business decisions, how they think about risk. And it's also how the organization is structured, such that a product like this, it cuts across everything. It cuts across consumer insights, it cuts across supply chain and product and all of these different areas, compliance, you name it. And what I've heard from a lot of our clients is that the one common manager for a connected product ecosystem is the CEO. And at that point, your decision-making you can't possibly burden that person with all of the trade-off calls and difficult things that happen through this process. And so basically needing to create a new organization that owns these new initiatives, that has a bunch of the parts of the company underneath it and has more autonomy to run with it, I think ends up being something I see a lot of clients do in this space.
You both mentioned in this complexity partners. Kristin, what's the role of partners in this transformation? How do you see tapping into them and collaborating with you?
For me, it's primarily, and I won't say only, but primarily perspective. We can look at a problem from our point of view, and we know we have blind spots. We just don't know what they are. And I think that's been the advantage of our partnership, is having that advantage of a different perspective and thought process and challenging what we may say. Obviously, we'll go 1, 2, 3, and our partner's saying, actually, let's do it a different way and in out of order, and it'll get us there faster. And just challenging what we may take as a given. Like large corporations are often stuck in doing things in a formulaic way. I think those partners can come in, challenge our thinking as long as you're open for it. And that's been one of the benefits of, we knew we didn't know everything. Let me say that. But we knew enough to be annoyingly dangerous. And we're really lucky to have a partner that took us under their wings and showed us the things we needed to focus on and not get distracted by what we would probably have gotten caught up in. The other thing I'll call out, just because I feel like they're a bit of an unsung hero, is our project management. And we've got that internally, but project management from this side, and it is, the PM on the job, I'll define like the strategy, but if there's not my colleague running project management point, there's a lot of things that go haywire very quickly. And I'm just to publicly acknowledge how thankful I am for our project managers on the Synapse side.
Nice.
I think you're touching upon a topic that myself and Jeff had several conversations on, which is the importance of this new role when you deal with this very complex ecosystem. So should be a project manager that has an understanding of all the dimensions that needs to interweave, because you cannot understand that complexity if you don't know at least a little to be able to steer the priorities and ensure that everything is on track.
Yeah.
And so as this complexity is amplifying, I think that finding those will be unicorn, at least for some years.
It's both the ability to synthesize across all these disparate capability groups that approach development in different ways. It's kind of understanding, man, how do I marry up agile software development with traditional waterfall hardware development that has to hit a specific milestone? How do I even do that? So that from a program management perspective, but also I think the technical architecture is another piece. If you can find one person to do both, amazing. But the likelihood is you're going to need some technical architect that also thinks about, where does the data need to live? Where should my algorithms live? How do I make this efficient? How do I marry up this ecosystem from the technical perspective too? I think those are two sort of connective tissue roles that are super critical for a product like this.
Would agree. What do you think, Jeff, are the critical elements of transformation that the clients that wants to deliver projects like Petivity really need to take on their own?
Yeah, I think we've hit the kind of big ones. It's the sort of recognition that the innovator's dilemma is real and that they need to take a different approach. I think that manifests in willingness to either create sort of an incubator approach or a new venture arm or something that gives enough agency to create space and to create resources that aren't beholden to the org structure. I think it's giving them some license to maybe play differently from how the organization operates. Let's pilot, as opposed to make something perfect and launch it in millions of units. Maybe worrying less about compliance and some of these other factors just to get consumer feedback to test and iterate. And then, I think it's building up those skill sets that matter most, that are going to really help you with your core business and the things that you need to own in the longer term.
And this is more from the organizational side. But despite that, we have seen lots of connected products that hit the market and just fail, right? We probably can build a long list.
Oh, completely. Yeah. So
Luckily, Petivity is not in that.
In terms of companies thinking about getting into this space, we, as Capgemini, ran this survey recently of 1,000 companies that are either building connected products or about to or considering it. And we were getting some themes out of it. And one of the big themes was, a lot of people think this is a big space, but very few of them have actually successfully launched a product. And many of them are stuck at the sort of POC and pilot stage. And as I was digging into the data more to better understand this, the engineer in me started out thinking, oh, this is going to be because it's hard. It's hard to do this. It's hard to do the engineering. It's just difficult to put together the team you need and execute. And as much as that is true, it's probably not the real core reason. I think that the real reason people fail in this space, number one, is I think what was done well in this case, which is focusing on user value. I think a lot of people are looking at this as, oh, it's an opportunity for me as a business to add services or add a new revenue model, and or it's a way for me to start using technology in a new way. And those aren't the right reasons to do this. The right reason to do it is you've got an idea of value for your customer. So I think that's one. I think the other big one is it's related to it being hard, but it's that when you're going to invest in something like this, you at least have a concept of the ROI. Like, why would I go invest in this product as Purina? Like, why would I put however much money I'm going to put into that development? Why would I do it? And the reason is because you have upside, you have the value for the customer, but you also need to understand the cost. And that cost is the cost of developing it, it's the cost of operating it in an ongoing way, and it's the cost of transforming your company and hiring and all the things we just discussed. And so I think a lot of companies don't understand that landscape well enough. And as they start developing the product, they start iterating, they start prototyping, and now they start realizing just how much cost is going to be associated. And then it becomes a question of, am I actually going to see this investment through, or am I going to cut it? And especially if their org structure with the decision-making might make it slow to progress, now you've got a lot of reasons to not see it through. So I think those give some kind of cautionary tales of how to think about this space and how to approach it.
Would you have any reflection on that, Kristin?
Yeah, just as Jeff was talking through that, like understanding to your point, what is the end goal? Is it complementary to your existing business, or is this a whole new business that you are putting pressure to be a profit driver? Those are two very different paths to commercialization and kind of the leeway you give yourselves. And we've been really fortunate to have kind of the air cover from the organization to know that we deliver value that's really set in loyalty and cultivating an end relationship with our consumer that we aren't able to have right now outside of Petivity brand.
It requires time. You mentioned that, I think, when we were opening our conversation, that it took time. And
Yes.
it was the right time that it needed in order to be done right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a part of it, too, is consumers being open to it. The kind of stars almost had to align. I worry that had we actually done this in a meaningful way 5 years ago, I don't know that pet owners would be as open to it. The pandemic did a lot to advance our reliance on technology, but just in general, like where we've moved as a society and opening our homes to connected products and services. Even when we were in our proof of concept phase, some of the users we talked to were like, man, this feels like too much. This is me and my pet, and I don't want anything to interfere with that. Just even in the last 3 years, seen that evolve a little bit to see it more as a embellishment to the relationship instead of impediment.
Yeah. I think that there are a couple of aspects here which is interesting to investigate. And one is about what's the value exchange around the data. We spoke about the fact that the data are one of the core mechanisms that is transforming the business and transforming the value proposition. A lot of people speak about the fact that personalization is the thing that you get out of the data. What's your perspective, Jeff, about it? We are doing all this complexity just because we want more personalized experiences?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, personalization to me is maybe a piece of utility or value to the customer at the end of the day, but it's a really important one. And in this case, we're personalizing for the pet owner and for the pet. But I think moving further and further into personalization is going to just continue to be a trend. And we see that in all of the trends in AI and big data and everything else is, yes, you can do this as a holistic thing for everybody, but the more and more you can bring it down to an individual level, the better. And the trade-off, you sort of have the seesaw of, personalization and value for the customer. But to get that means more and more data and more personal information. And so I think what we've seen and what you were just describing is this trend where as long as we're bringing enough value, the consumer is going to be willing to give that data in exchange for a better, more personalized, more seamless service.
And I think that's the beauty of connected devices in general, because a lot of that data collection is done passively. Where some of our prior digital experiences at Purina have fallen apart is the requirement for users to check in and self-report what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And it's just not sustainable from an experience standpoint. So I think we have the benefit of kind of seamlessly capturing this data and making sense of it. But to your point about personalization, it is a big part of that loyalty that we talk about driving back to our users. There are good attempts, but no one will be able to deliver a personalized recommendation like Petivity will be. And there's a running joke on our team because at the outset of the program, I was adamantly opposed to making product recommendations back to our users because I didn't want to be perceived as like a Trojan horse for big pet food company. And I was like, completely undermine our relationship with our users if we just come out of the gate. And then through a proof of concept and pilot testing, we started to float these concepts and test it with users. And we really discovered that the personalization and specificity was what mattered. And now we're discovering that in the data we're collecting, there are so many more insights that aren't necessarily so focused on our core insight, but pretty interesting, especially for cat owners and their households. So opening that up to say, is there a premium model where we can expose some of these insights that are just novelty, fun, they're useful, but not necessarily tied to our core?
So the data are becoming a source of new ideas, let's say, for expanding your footprint with your customers, possibly new ones.
Yeah.
Jeff, going back to you and a point that you made before, still about the data. So you said that sometimes physical products are enabling us to collect data that we couldn't collect before. So the question that I want to make to you is, when is it worth?
Yeah. I think that this is a great case study in that and maybe has a few specific examples. So I guess one key thing I would call out is if you can get the data some other way, do it, right? Or even if you can figure out a proxy to get that information, do it. But if you really need information that you just can't get otherwise, in this case, that enables you to do something like close a feedback loop, that can be really valuable. And so that's one pillar or one reason I would look to saying, yeah, it's worth it. I think another reason is if you have some of this type of internal insight that you use to develop your core products that you can't somehow get to your end users, this now gives you a bridge to do it with a sort of direct consumer relationship. So if you aren't engaging with your consumers directly, you have an intermediary or a distributor or whatever else, this now gives you that window. And if you have something extra to bring to them that you can't bring to them today, that would be another reason to do it. And then I think the third big reason I'd call out would be because it's hard, it's differentiating and it gives you a defensibility that I think a lot of companies are looking for. If it's pure digital, a lot of other people might be able to do it too. But to build a connected, secure, reliable device that actually has a physical environment around it, that starts to become a lot harder and something other people might not be willing to invest in. So I think you can also develop real IP around it as well.
I think it's Petivity, but I think in the industry we see few players that are now seriously stepping into the connected product space. I remember when I had my iPod and there was I think it was 2005 or 2006 that Nike came out with the thing that you put in your soul and you connect to your iPod. And that felt a bit clunky, if I may. But from then we have seen an acceleration. So why there is this kind of spike now?
Yeah, what's it changing?
Why now?
Yeah.
Super fun, but why?
I've had this really fun experience because over 12 years now at Synapse to live through that arc of these types of products and some of the things we've talked about. So yeah, I think going back to that time, I feel like the kind of key things that have changed since then are, one is processing power, just the ability to take information even at the edge and do something useful for the end user. So, the difference between that puck that you put in your shoe and your digital assistant today and the amount of processing that's happening locally on that device, that's a huge delta that's happened during that time. And then I think the other big delta is the progress that we've made in algorithms and AI, and that really enabling us to move from, they even called it, I think, the quantified self movement at the time. Yeah. Quantified self, it's just like, where's the insight? Where's the value, right? So I think that's been another big part of the progression, is to move towards, what's the point? How do you give somebody insight? How do you take action from this? So those two things I think have combined. There's a few other things that have changed a lot. Supply chain, we're seeing things move around the world, and the nature of product development getting faster and trying to get as close to agile as we can. But I really think those are the core pieces.
But then what's next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. What do you see?
Yeah. Where are we going from here? So I think we've talked about some of the aspects of this already. Hyper personalization is going to be a thing that we enable through better and better data, better and better understanding of consumers. So that seems like almost a no-brainer. I think on the AI front, I think these connected products are actually going to be something that enables differentiation. So I'm watching this whole chat GPT thing happen right now. And, to some extent, I look at it and see these big platforms are going to be moving from kind of the search space to the chat and the real-time AI-based recommendation space. But at some point, they're all going to be the same because they're all running off the same data. What's the difference between Bing and Google, really? And if the next step is the same. So I think connected products actually enable access to novel data. And that starts to become something that differentiates those platforms and becomes a further engine for growth here. The other thing that I think is definitely going to be happening, and we haven't talked about in this conversation,
Take note,
is sustainability, right? At this point, we're all experiencing the effects of climate change. We're all seeing it. Consumers are saying they're willing to spend more for a more sustainable product. And so I think there's both this kind of heightened focus on the sustainability of the products themselves and the services that we're going to be launching. And so that's, I think, a big trend. I'm also seeing a lot of opportunity. We talked about expanding from this product to other markets. I think the climate tech market is a place where these types of capabilities can be applied as well and bring a lot of value. Let's make things more optimized and reduce costs and power consumption. So I think sustainability is going to become a more and more important piece. And the bar to launch a product to have a carbon footprint impact is going to get higher and higher as a result. So I think we may actually see more consolidation, fewer products from that perspective.
Okay. That's quite a context in which we project ahead, at least 5 years, something like that,
Yeah.
as the next wave. So, Kristin, if you think about these kind of in the next 5 years and some of the reflection or conversation topics that we hit today about this connected world and the potential that comes with that in terms of value to people, value to pets, value to organizations and business and planet, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the beginning of Petivity. And we started to have this conversation before we jumped in here. And I was like, put a pin in it, because if I say it. But the idea of so Jeff is a relatively new parent. He has a new kid at home. I've got young kids at home. And the recurring stress for me having young kids, and now I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, so they can start to tell me what's wrong. But when you have an infant, the main stress is they cannot communicate. And there's technology all around us that helps us do a better job of communicating. And that's what kind of I've distilled Petivity's value proposition into is pets can never tell us what's wrong. So how can we be that conduit to translate that back to the user? So I think all of what we've discussed today leads to that capability of translating needs to people who can make decisions that make a difference on those needs. And to your point just now, how do we automate that in ways that users are just, pet parents are kind of along for the ride in that automation of we know what's best because we've tracked it for so long and we're the experts. We get your consent to automate this, and then you can just focus on what matters most in that relationship with your pet.
Jeff, a closing word?
Yeah, I love it. And that's actually very similar to some of the thoughts I was having, where I think, what we've really come around to in this conversation multiple times of the nugget of wisdom from this whole program was just maintaining that focus on the value for the end customer. And all the other stuff is complex, and yes, the ROI might be a difficult thing to understand, and we might need to grow the organization and iterate and all these other things. But at the end of the day, if we have a good enough value proposition for that customer and we maintain focus on, that's really the winning message. And I think now that you have me thinking about longer term future, I think exactly what you were just saying, where, if I rewind back to the quantified self movement, okay, it's about data. Okay, no, it's not about data. Now it's about insight. And that's what we're doing today. But I think the next step beyond that is action. When we build enough trust that these types of systems can provide really good input and actually make a decision for you or change the physical world for you in some way. Your vet appointment is booked for you and your food that's going to improve their diet is already shipped and on its way. that starts to become a pretty cool, valuable user experience if we can build the trust to enable it.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Quite a good insight to close the conversation. Thanks for joining. Kristin, thanks so much for joining
Thanks
this
for having
conversation.
me.
That has been a
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
That's our show. The Design Mind Frogcast was brought to you by Frog, a leading global creative consultancy that is part of Capgemini Invent. Learn more about the launch of Petivity and how Nestlé Purina is transforming pet care with AI at a link in this episode's show notes. If you want to really dig into the subject even more, you'll also find the link to learn more about the connected world at Frog, as well as an article written by Chiara Diana for Business Leader, which lays out the 5 challenges to overcome when building a sustainable, customer-centric world. We really want to thank our experts for sharing their insights. That's Chiara Diana, Chief Design Officer at Frog, Kristin Slater, Senior Manager IoT Products Petivity at Nestlé Purina, and Jeff Hebert, Global Head of Intelligent Products and Services in Intelligent Industry for Capgemini Invent and President of Synapse Product Development. We also want to thank you, dear listener. If you like what you heard, tell your friends, rate and review to help others find us, and be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Find lots more to think about from our Global Frog team at frog.co/designmind. That's frog.co. Follow Frog on Twitter at @frogdesign and @frog_design on Instagram. And if you have any thoughts about the show, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out at frog.co/contact. Thanks for listening. Now go make your mark.